Hello and welcome back to the Irish Angle in association with William Hill. This week's episode is joined by Paddy Flood and Johnny Ward as usual. Paddy, Johnny, how are you keeping?
Good, Emma.
Good, Em.
Good stuff, lads. We've plenty to discuss this week, but there's kind of an obvious starting point here. Last week we got the decision, I suppose, of the referrals committee on the Redwood Queen case, which has been dragging on for a number of months now. Philip and Charles Burns were both cleared of any wrongdoing by the referrals committee over the incident, which happened back in May. They came to the conclusion that Philip Burns' dismount from Redwood Queen was an example of poor horsemanship on part of the jockey. And Charles Burns was also cleared of any wrongdoing based on a statement that he made to the IHRB. Those were the charges that were brought against them. I suppose let's before we go into some of the details of what came in the aftermath of the verdict. Johnny, I'll go to you first. What were your kind of initial reactions to the outcome?
Yeah, I got word early in the morning that this was going to happen, and I wasn't surprised. I think Vinny, who's not on the podcast this week, he wrote about it in his blog at the time that after we heard the extraordinary takes on the matter from Leighton Aspel and Davy Russell, I think Vinny more or less preempted that this was going to be very difficult to prove. And I suppose Jeff Buckley has a line in one of his songs, you're useless like cops at the scene of a crime. And I think the problem, I'm not calling this a crime now, but I think the problem with this case, as has been well advertised since, was what happened on the evening. Now, my information is that, the BHA has come out quite strongly, it would seem, on this in terms of, the information it was relaying to the IHRB prior to the race in Wexford, that fateful race in Wexford. I don't believe the BHA didn't do its job in this instance, and now its relationship with the IHRB has been severed, which is, another questionable matter for the future. But I think the BHA did its job, and the problems in this case began right after the race, really. And what we have now is a case for me that's utterly demoralizing, really. I would imagine that morale in the IHRB is extremely low in general, and I'd say it's never been lower after this because, and I've sympathy for the IHRB. I've sympathy for these people who go to work every day, the never-ending carousel of racing, and they go in, and when stuff like this happens, it's a bit like, being an FAI blazer back in the day. You want to keep your head down now because the IHRB is getting nothing but negative publicity, and I've sympathy for all of that, but this was so unsatisfactory, Emma, in so many ways. To arrive at this conclusion after what it was 7 or 8 months, and to have the situation where prior to the hearing the IHRB gave notice that it intended to call evidence pertinent to betting patterns which occurred in respect of the race in question, and the evidence was to have to be given by Mr. Krask, a betting and racing analyst, but that position changed in the day of the hearing. Kind of stuff like that. The fact that the stewards on the night weren't alarmed by what they were apparently told, what was apparently relayed to them in terms of the betting patterns. Now, betting patterns in racing, for me, they need to be discussed more. I'm tipping up a horse on Saturday that I tip up as a bet at 9-2, and I'm wondering whether or not to back him at 9-1. And going into the race, the betting doesn't really make any sense to me. And I decide to back the horse anyway, and he's beaten. And I kind of wonder after the race, why was the betting on a horse I'd consider a 6-4 shot? Why was he 9-1 and stuff like that? So betting really does need to be looked at in terms of what's going on in a race. But for me, this is the lowest point of the history of the IHRB in my lifetime, because this whole story shows that the stewarding situation we have doesn't really do its job properly. This was, the reputational damage for Irish racing out of this, whatever happened, and I don't think we'll ever know what actually fully happened in this story because, we just haven't heard much from the people involved. I mean, probably never will. But the reputational damage for Irish racing, this should not be underestimated. And we can make these kind of glib points about, people they'll still bet away on racing and all of that. If this was your first bet in Irish racing, I'd advise you never to have a bet in Irish racing again. I'm utterly demoralised by the whole thing, to be honest. And I know I was criticised at the time, our first podcast afterwards. I said I'd a lot of sympathy for Philip Burns. I still have a lot of sympathy for Philip Burns. I'll make that point over and over again. I do have sympathy for Philip Burns, regardless of what you think happened. He's had one trainer giving him outside winners this season. and that's effectively Gary Bannon for Bill Durkin, and Gary's been a big backer of him. Philip has not benefited from this, regardless of what you think happened. And I still have sympathy for him because I think he's a talented rider. But the whole thing left a rancid taste in my mouth, to be honest. Just the conclusion last week, and the fact that this is where we ended up with all of this.
Yeah, just to kind of build on a couple of points that Johnny made there. Look, whether Philip Burns, Charles Burns are innocent or guilty, it's kind of beyond the point now. It's, the verdict is out and that's that. I suppose the big talking point now is, did the IHRB kind of do enough to kind of fulfill the public's confidence in the fact that the sport is being regulated professionally and thoroughly, I suppose. And kind of one point that Johnny mentioned there was the report from the BHA during the week, which came out after the IHRB referral hearings verdict, which, Paddy, I thought was fairly damning on the IHRB. Just the fact that they were notified before the race of suspicious betting patterns, and that they contacted them a number of times throughout the day as well. And just the fact that the stewards felt there was no need to call the rider in after the race just didn't really sit right with me now, because that was kind of one of the major talking points, I suppose, before anything happened, before the case was even heard. Just the fact the race day stewards didn't act on that information they got from the BHA has been causing a bit of a stir. And Paddy, what did you make of all that?
Yeah, I was very surprised, Emma. I think the BHA came out and made the statement because I think Richie Forrestal might have wrote a report in the Racing Post, kind of having a crack at the BHA, saying where were they were non-existent, and then the report was written to say that actually, I think 3 times within the day they had reported to the stewards and the integrity board of the IHRB that something was amiss, and listen, it doesn't take a scientist to say, oh, okay, well, we've been notified that there's a strange betting pattern going on here, and the jockey has come off the horse at the last hurdle when the horse didn't make any mistake. Let's make no bones about it, that horse winged the hurdle. So the case was that Philip said the horse hit him in the backside and fired him forward. I've seen that happen a million times. So have ye, but I've seen it happen a million times to young riders that don't really know what they're doing. You could see it more pony club sort of job more than a jockey, usually with the speed. It takes that kind of bounce factor out of your riding. So if you're jumping a hurdle, you're tending to get lower into the saddle and more closer to the horse's neck. Whereas this case, Philip's bum was hit. But this is his excuse. The bum was hit and he was fired off. And then bringing in Davy Russell as an independent, and Leighton Aspel, who works for the IHRB, 2 brilliant riders in their day, and two mighty horsemen, but both had skin in the game. Leighton works for the IHRB, and Davy Russell has a good relationship with Charles Burns from riding winners down through the years. So I think that just was another thing that stuck out a bit, that it didn't really need. But I think I'm the same as Johnny. You feel down because of it. You feel like you've opened the door now to, and we all know what social media is like. Anybody can say anything on social media, and headlines will get people to click on it, and there's no regulation of what you'll say. So they've just opened a massive rabbit hole here. I think the mistake was made on the day, not calling the rider in, and not maybe then referring on to if the stewards on the day didn't feel like they could do anything about it, but they still should have had an inquiry and put it on to maybe more experienced people if that was the problem. But the thing with the BHA and the IHRB cancelling that 350,000 payment they had going for regulatory, I really, really fear, are the IHRB running out of money? Because I think the wage bill there would be very, very big. Look, this case leaves all these questions open when it shouldn't be. And I would love to see the new CEO, well, he's not that new anymore, is it Dara Loughlin, come out, because I think I've only ever seen that man twice. Once was when he was getting slated on RTE. Well, not slated, but getting questioned on RTE by Ger Lyons, saying, and Ger was saying the same thing. He didn't know him, he'd never met him, and he was the head of the regulatory board in Ireland, and he should be meeting big trainers. And I think the second time I've ever seen him was in a picture in Hong Kong, at some convention. I've never seen him front the media, and if that's the leader of the pack, well, you're not going to get any more information from the people below him.
Yeah, I have to agree with the points you're making. And look, for me, it's hard to have confidence in the IHRB's processes after seeing this. Like, you just feel like, at the time, to be honest, I felt, look, there wasn't much of a case there. It was, when the kind of script from the hearing, I suppose, first came out, it was, Leighton Aspel versus Davy Russell. That was the only really bits of evidence they had. Davy saying he didn't, Leighton saying he did. So look, it was a he said, I didn't think it was ever going to stick, but the stuff around the BHA and a few other things kind of made me feel maybe the IHRB could have done a little bit more. And regardless if they did or did not, like, they could have brought Philip Burns in on the day, and still the outcome could have been the exact same. But you would have just felt more confidence in what they were doing, and that they kind of did everything they could to ensure the sport is being run fairly when the public are confident in it. Because you all saw the kind of the reaction on social media, everyone saying Irish racing is bent, the IHRB didn't do their job and things like that. But yeah, look, it's tough. And like, one kind of thing that kind of was raised in my mind afterwards, just the fact that race day stewards in Ireland, I know there will be an IHRB steward on every race day board on the day as well, who will be a professional, let's say. But most of the stewards on the day would be volunteers who are not working and racing every day of the week. They're not employed, I suppose, full-time by the IHRB. Johnny, is that a bit amateur for a professional sport who are getting massive amounts of government funding every year? The betting public are betting on it. People are putting money into racing every single day, and we're still relying on volunteers to kind of regulate the sport, I suppose, in a way, on the race day at least.
Yeah, I've said this before, things happen just because they've happened forever, and you don't kind of question them, and you just keep doing them. And it's so embedded now that the stewarding system is what it is. The stewards go to the races, and they might interview a jockey afterwards, and they might not. Like, Irish racing will collapse without government support and betting. Needs government support, needs the money that's coming in for the exchequer, a lot of money coming in every year on a sport that isn't the majority punted sport anymore, say, relative to football. It's an anachronistic system. Racing's lucky to have that government support. I would defend it, but it's lucky to have it. It also needs people betting on it at a time when bookmakers, online bookmakers, have less and less interest in racing and find it a bit of a pain in the hole in many respects. And you see some of the alarming trends in terms of betting turnover, like really, really falling in Britain, which is alarming, and a lot of money going to the black market and all of that. So the stewarding system, to me, right now isn't fit for purpose, Emma. Like, you could get I like in life, I like good people to be rewarded. I like people who are honest and who do their best, and basically are generally good people. I like them to be rewarded. So I like honest trainers to be rewarded, in the sense that horses that aren't buried down the field all the time, and horses that aren't like trainers constantly kind of handicapping horses and so on, even though it's gone on forever. Like, I'd like to see the honest trainer rewarded, and there's probably not enough in Ireland of genuine stewarding in the situation of calling in jockeys who are effectively riding non-triers. Every jockey rides a non-trier, probably regularly in most cases, but we don't have a stewarding system that is fit for purpose anymore. And I can think of several cases in 2025, one which was absolutely shocking, which didn't get much publicity in terms of a close finish, where more connections got away with stuff that I'd have serious questions. There were loads of instances last year where I was kind of looking like, what was that jockey not even called in? What? So I feel that the stewarding system as it is inadequate. If we had professional stewards, I don't think they even need to be at the races, as long as they have access to what the closed circuit TV and all of that, and they can make judgments on that. But a lot more scrutiny on jockeys than is the case now, because it's too lax. This was deeply unsatisfactory. deeply, deeply unsatisfactory. I think the nadir in terms of on course stewarding, this must be the nadir of it in terms of what happened. But we need to have a big talk about this from Horse Racing Ireland down to the IHRB, down to stakeholders, the media as well. The media needs to talk about this. There's not enough scrutiny in the media of all of this stuff. We need to talk about this because we're reliant on government support, and this was the reputational damage of this is massive as far as I'm concerned. It really is massive, and I will reiterate that point again. We need to look at modern day stewarding. Just because we've done it forever, long before the advent of technology, where we're at today, do we need to change our stewarding system because this didn't work?
What do you think, Paddy? Do you agree, disagree? What's the stewarding situation like in Ireland for you?
Listen, no one comes out the winner of this, Charles Burns or Irish racing. I was lucky enough to ride in Australia for a couple of years. Chalk and cheese, Emma, absolutely chalk and cheese. And I'll go from the little things, from Ireland, you can walk into the weigh room with your phone and be on your phone and have a chat with whoever you like. England, you can't. You have to go and ask the stewards for permission to make a phone call or that. But Australia, it's if you're seen with a phone, you're ripped out of your hand and opened up to see exactly who you're speaking to. James MacDonald, who'd be a champion rider, we know him from riding winners at Ascot. Like he done, I think, did he do 6 or 8 months of a ban just for associating himself with people who were deemed as not fit or for holding, being good, proper people in racing. He didn't do anything. He didn't have a bet or anything, but just his friendliness with them, and that's the extreme. But we are very much like Johnny said. It's been that way all the time. I don't know. It would cost a lot of money to bring in like a Hong Kong or a Australian model. It'd be you'd be in talking millions to be getting full-time professional stewards. And it's funny, because you mightn't even keep them then, because a lot of the Australian stewards head to Hong Kong for better money. So, yeah, I don't know what the answer is, Emma, but we're not the winners in this. Irish racing aren't the winners. It comes out leaving the door open to be kicked.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I know the IHRB have said they're satisfied with the way everything has gone, but I'm sure they'll probably be looking a little bit into the way things went on as well, and hopefully they might learn a few things on what went right and what went wrong for them throughout the case. But lads, we'll move on. Maybe something a little bit more light-hearted. Friday Night Live kind of kicked off last week. It's a new incentive. I think it's kind of conjunction with Invades. You might have seen them on TikTok. They're kind of a student race day kind of thing. They interview race scores and things like that. But it's launched on ITV. It's a series of Friday Night Live, as it suggests, Friday night race series. I'm going to be shown on ITV every week. Last week was the first week, I think. Look, I have to admit, I didn't actually watch it live myself now, but I did see clips of it on social media. It's there's kind of a speed dating element to it. You've got the Invade presenters kind of going around picking out people to go on dates and stuff like that. It got fairly mixed reviews on social media, lads. I'll go to you first, I suppose. What were your views on it? Johnny, maybe you first. Did you see any of the Friday Night Live last week?
No, I Friday nights for me are watching Dundalk and the League of Ireland, to be honest. So I didn't have apologies for coming without having seen it. But to be honest, I generally I would laud ideas like this. They're making an effort. Like racing's a fun night out. To mix it up with sort of more social aspects like that, I wouldn't knock this at all. Certainly not knock it until I've seen it. And there was a mixed reaction, but we're talking about it. Racing needs to be promoted, I think, as a fun activity as well. And I'm probably not in a great position to talk about it, but I certainly wouldn't be knocking it yet.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, to be honest. But there's plenty of kind of old school, maybe racing people knocking it on Twitter and stuff like that. But I don't think it's not really targeted at the likes of us, probably the likes of the listeners of this podcast, the kind of real, people who watch racing every day of the week. It's kind of more targeted at maybe your Aunt Mary, who likes a bit of reality TV on ITV on a Friday evening. She might be switching through the channels and see this speed dating and might end up watching the racing afterwards is what I think they're kind of targeting. Whether or not that'll convert people into racing fans is probably another question itself, but it might get people watching the race on a Friday night anyway, at least. Paddy, what were your thoughts on it, or the idea in general?
I think it's an idea, and it's up and going. I did watch a few bits of it, and the speed dating bit was absolute cringe. Now maybe I'm just getting too old, but it was so wrong. It was just, even if it was a speed dating show, it was absolute melts, the two of them on there talking, and it was real fake. But anyway, look, it felt a little bit like a rent a crowd. It felt like the guy who's the head of it, he could be running a club in Ibiza. He's that sort of fella, and he'll bring along his crew. And look, they got 6,000 people there. A lot of people were giving out about the ITV presenters. You couldn't hear them, and maybe that's a good thing when you can't. Some of them you're happy enough not to hear them. But listen, it got 6,000 people. It does feel a bit like a rent a crowd, and it feels like a gimmick. But if it gets 6,000 people every Friday, if you get 500 of them out of it that actually go to a normal race meeting, then we're winning. That sort of way. I seen 3 girls on Nick Luck the day after, and they seem to have fun, but just same as social media, they got absolutely abused because one of them was related to someone who knew something about racing, and everyone just wants to have a pop. But look, it's a bit of a rent a crowd. It's a gimmick. It might work. Who knows? It might work. Let them at it. Let them do it. I don't really watch. I'm a bit like Johnny. I'll watch soccer on a Friday night or a little bit of Dundalk. If it was on ITV or RT, it didn't bother me. I wouldn't probably watch it anyway. But look, it'll probably be next Friday night, and we'll be talking about Constitution Hill and the crowd being there. So, listen, it's a bit of a gimmick like Constitution Hill. He's well suited.
Yeah, look, I'd agree. I don't think it's dirty doing a whole pile of harm. It's probably worth a go for the few weeks that are in it, and look, we won't dwell on Constitution Hill a whole
Only
pile.
two people now. Only two people can save. Only two people can save racing: Constitution Hill and Oisin Murphy.
We might see it next week in conjunction with Invades live on ITV. Johnny, what do you think, Oisin and Constitution Hill?
I think you almost throw your eyes up to the heaven or whatever you want to call it with Constitution Hill. But like Tom Stanley was saying on Racing TV during the week, he still can see him going off favourite in the race. And I'm kind of a bit like that. I do feel this Cheltenham has just so much going for it. There's so many different angles and like mad narratives. Maybe Philip Burns will ride a winner over there. Who knows? So many things are going to happen at Cheltenham this year. But I do feel if we could get Constitution Hill there and like heavily punted on the day and to win under Nico de Boinville, wouldn't that be something else, like beating Lossiemouth or Brighter Days Ahead or whatever? But I mean, when the racing post is shown videos of him emerging from stalls, I do think it's time to look for something else to be doing. But it's been a bit of fun, I suppose.
Yeah, it will be. Hopefully he'll end up in the champion hurdle. Now, quotes from Nicky during the week didn't sound that promising to me, but Oisin's getting on the bandwagon anyway, and we'll be watching eagerly, I'm sure, Friday week when he makes his flat debut. But we'll move on, lads. More pressing matters. Grand National entries out last week. 49 of the 78 entered are Irish trained. Entries down a bit on last year. 78 entered, like I said. I think there was 90 last year. It kind of seems to be going down and down a little bit every year. JP obviously has a strong team. Willie has 15 in there. Gordon has 12. Strong in Irish contingent, as I said. We don't have the weights until next week, I don't think. Paddy, anything in particular catch your eye there at the National?
They what caught my eye is the 78 entries in it. That's extremely low. That's what caught my eye. Now, without looking at a horse or anything. And I've heard of, it was Ben Pauling on Nick Luck the other morning saying, there's no problem here, there's still good entries. I think this race has a major problem. I really, really do, because anyone I've spoke to about the Grand National for the last year, everyone's response, whether it be people in racing or outside it, have, sure, that race is fecked. That's not a race anymore. And that's the vibe we're getting off the race. And I have a feeling that the BHA, if that race was gone, they wouldn't be too worried. And I mean, this is mental. This is the Grand National. This is the best race in the world. You can go to Australia, you can go to America, you can go where you like. They've heard of the English Grand National, the A3 Grand National. It's timeless race, but I have a feeling that they're just stringing it along and letting it go. And for me, 78 entries, that's really, really poor. Really, really poor. Um, Now, look, there's if you want to speak about what's what, I think we're a little bit early until we see the weights and stuff like that. You're probably better off. There'll be your usual horses there, I.A. Maximus and last year's winners and stuff like that. Will all be at the top of the betting, but I'd like to see the weights before I'd name the colours. But I'd be really worried about this race.
Yeah, it's a good point. Johnny, would you be worried? Is the national kind of a dying race?
It's basically a glorified American Grand National now in terms of the jumping test. Like, I I have very little interest in the Grand National, the race it's become. I can see why they changed it, but like the changes are such a reflection of the insecurity of British racing and the pandering to people who wouldn't know the end of a horse from the end of an ass, like that they've gotten to this race that like it's almost like now the BHA's main aim with the race is not to have a faller in it. Now, I mean, I've spoken about the meat industry before and how well horses are looked after. In thoroughbred horses in training are better looked after than a lot of um people in Ireland and Britain. And there is an element of risk in these races. There's an element of risk for the jockey, a massive element of risk. Maybe they should have made some tinkering from the race, that say would have been the race when I was younger, and it was an extreme jumping test. I actually don't know what this race, what the point of it is anymore. Like to jump over glorified hurdles and win some good prize money potentially, but like this is, as Paddy said, the numbers are alarming. But I think the Grand National to me means very, very little now. And like being honest with you, if I didn't watch the race, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest. And that to me is just the way the race has gone in my head.
Yeah, you'd wonder, are there owners and trainers kind of thinking the same? The fact like the entries are so low, is the magic of it kind of gone maybe a small bit? So look, we won't go into it too much. I suppose, like Paddy said, we've no weights until next week. But we'll move on to something else. As the Academy hurdles kind of became a bit of a talking point again last week, and we obviously discussed them when they were first announced, before there was ever one run. And like, I suppose we all kind of said we'd wait and see to make a verdict on it. Kind of a controversial enough initiative when it was announced first, and it's kind of been brought into maybe a bit of controversy again last week, when the first 4-year-old point-to-point winner of the year had come out of 2 Academy hurdles. He had run twice, and he went and beat the 4-year-olds first time out last week on their first run. And then yesterday's 4-year-old bumper winner at Nace had won a Academy hurdle as well, and I think the second horse had been second in Academy hurdle as well. So look, it's kind of given the Academy hurdle horses an advantage, the fact they can go back from winning an Academy hurdle and go back to a bumper, go back to a point to point. I'm not sure can they go back to a point to point after winning one or not, but they can run in the one and go back anyway regardless. Paddy, look, we kind of reserved judgment when we were speaking about them first. What is your kind of take on the whole Academy hurdle situation now after we've seen a fair few of them on, I suppose?
I kind of got mixed feelings on it. I think our discussion was, what was the point of them? And I think myself and yourself kind of said it, they were going to be selling races. And I think that's proven its point. The Manila Yoga horse, he won one, Nichols bottom. Two big money horses gone to England already. That horse that won the point weekend, that Renan won, he's going to be big money because he hacked around and looked very, very professional. I suppose, Derek O'Connor wrote his piece in the Racing Post last week as well. But I wonder, Richard Pugh is very much comes from the point-to-point field, but he's very much a salesman and he's a thinking man. And I wonder, could it be the end of the days for the 4 and 5-year-olds point-to-points? Is the money gone so big that people are going to get these horses ready at 3 and get them to a race course, safer, easier, sort of money, more professional? Well, more professional, we're saying with the stewards, but it's definitely a selling mechanism for Ireland. Am I against them? No, I'm not really against them, to be honest. I'd nearly rather see younger horses going around in a hurdle race rather than slogging it out in a 3-mile point to point. That's just my opinion. Now, I'm not a point to point man, so I would probably, and I haven't really asked any of them guys their opinions on them, but they definitely need to be listened to.
Yeah, look, it's probably not a major issue for the point to points either. I think I was reading a piece in the Irish Field last weekend. I think there was only maybe 4 horses who ran an Academy of Hurdles have taken out Hunter certs. So look, it's not going to be every 4-year-old maiden going forward when we won by an Academy Hurdle horse, but it's probably something that might be kind of creeping into people's minds next year, maybe if the series keeps going. Look, to be honest, I don't see the point in them, the fact that you can go back and, if you win a hurdle, you can go back and win a maiden hurdle, you can go back and win a bumper. You're a winner or you're not. Why do you get 2 bites of the cherry? I'm not against getting the national hunt horses started younger. I think that part of it is perfectly fine, but the fact that you're a winner but you're not just kind of makes it seem like it's, the sole purpose of it is to sell horses. You can sell it on to maybe a bigger trainer and they can go back and win their maiden hurdle again. That's the part of it I have an issue with, and I don't think they should be allowed to go back for point to points either. It's kind of, Derek kind of alluded to it in his article, you've got kind of fellas who are specialising in getting these 4-year-olds ready for point to points. And, they're going to have to rush their horses to get them up to a different kind of level of fitness, I suppose, if they're going to be taken on by horses that are coming back off the track. Look, as we said, it's not a massive issue for the moment because there isn't going to be a whole pile of them. But, in years to come, maybe it might be. Johnny, Academy Hurdles, what are your thoughts?
Like the anomaly of being able to basically go in and win again in a bumper or hurdle race, like that probably doesn't really make sense. I think the Irish Racehorse Trainers Association, whilst kind of more or less supportive of the concept of the initiative, I think its idea in terms of talking to the stakeholders at the time is that you could be a second season novice, say the following season. But to be fair, like you probably shouldn't have exactly what you said, Emma. Like you're either a winner or you're not. And these races they're not they're not egg and spoon races. Like they're decent. They're very good trainers involved. These horses are a lot of them trained to be sold, and you've seen that they are kind of fulfilling their what was supposed to be their purpose. It is kind of working in that respect, and that these horses are going on to be good, like, and they're being bought for good money, and they're eroding the prominence of 4-year-old maidens. And I'm not a point-to-point person, but I really do wonder, like, who's benefiting, how many people benefit from the predominance of 4-year-old maidens, where, it's for me, it's kind of counter the spirit of national hunt racing, that it really makes it so professional. It's kind of not what point to point should be about. Point to point should be about the farmer's field and horse run against each other and a good day for the local hunt or whatever, rather than these ruthless 4-year-old maidens. And then the horses that go to them and are bought, like that rules out the chance of a kind of a beef or salmon type, like the horses that come through slowly with no pedigree that happen to be very good. It just makes national hunt racing and the concentration of the few, and that these horses are prepared by very, very talented people to win, and then they're sold for lottery number money, and it's not I don't know, like, even for the horse, like, why would you train a horse to win a 4-year-old chase, then go back into a bumper hurdle, and then go back into a chase 3 years later, but like have him absolutely gunned to win a point to point, more or less? Like, let's be honest. I mean, if it's a selling game, that's where you're at. So, like, I don't really have an issue with having more emphasis on horses at the track, and bring horses to the track rather than, like, have this massive emphasis on 4-year-old maidens. Maybe I'm wrong, and point to point handlers might disagree with me on that. But I do think, Emma, your point, like, you're either a winner or you're not, and these are legitimate races. We bet on them, and we monitor them. We look at them as if they're any other sort of race, really. So I do feel the Irish Racehorse Trainers Association, their attitude on that, it's hard to fault it. And maybe you could be a second season novice or whatever, but maybe they could look at that, because that doesn't really add up at this stage.
Yeah, doesn't add up for me either. And look, I'm sure there'll be plenty more discussion around it before it goes into next year's calendar. But we'll go back to some of last week's racing, kind of starting with the Irish stuff. We'll go all the way back to Fairyhouse on Tuesday. And I suppose maybe one of the last weeks for pointers towards the festival, kind of dwindling down in time now. And I'd say we saw plenty of them throughout the week. I suppose starting off with Old School Outlaw, who won the Solarina at Fairyhouse on Tuesday. Plenty of people were shocked when she beat Bambino Fever. at the start of the year, but it looks no fluke now. She's 11-4 for the Mares Novice. She changed into the JP McManus Silks, and Paddy, she was very, very impressive. She looks an exciting one for Gordon.
She's a smashing filly, isn't she, Emma? Done a hell of a lot right for the Inform, Mark Walsh and JP team. You know, just they've had some time now the last month, haven't they? But she's cracking mare. Jumps really well. I expected her to do that because, you know, I hold Bambino Fever in very high regard. So I was hoping for a performance like that and expecting it. And she really took the eye and she is going to move again from the run.
Yeah, I know you're not a massive fan of those mares races at Cheltenham, Johnny, but it looks like a cracker now. A rematch Bambino Fever and Old School Outlaw. It'll be a good one at the festival. But you were in Punchestown yourself on Tuesday, and our old friend, the Game of Two Halves, came out and talked. Was there any comment from the connections this time?
It really was a game of two halves, wasn't it, for that horse over the last couple of runs? Good performance, and you know, a horse that was quite weak in the betting. If you're strike for the integrity of the game and all of that, you know, that was a good effort. I just think Mark Walsh is riding outstandingly well at the moment. Between that horse and Crocora Hills that he won on, he was very, very good on the day. You know, I did a piece with connections of James the Brave actually on the day, and I don't know if you've seen it on social media, but just to provide a bit of context, that I'd no idea going into that interview what it was going to entail. So I if you haven't seen it, I just think it's kind of heartwarming what racing actually can do in terms of putting a smile on people's face who might know nothing about the individuals involved. But to be honest, Meme, I know you're knocking me about the mares races, but if imagine throwing the two of them, Bambino Fever and Old School Outlaw, into the Supreme, which looks a really good race at the moment. And it'd be like an incredible contest. But Old School Outlaw, I was very impressed. I call this race absolutely arseways in terms of the betting. When this race originally on, I thought Plastil and Nation was a real lump on job at 5-2. I thought Old School Outlaw was probably flattered by beating Bambino Fever. But the one issue I'd have here is Plastil and Nation was all over the shop to beat Carry On Heidi, who was rated 114. She was all out to beat her. So I do wonder, is she a bit flattered? Maybe the times will say something else, but she just does everything right, and I'd be no way confident at all Bambino Fever will definitely beat her at Cheltenham. And fair enough, we can likely say the two of these mares probably will go to that race, and sometimes you'll get these really good novice mares, novice hurdles, where you have a proper match and proper contest. But to be fair, this does look like a good renewal of the race, and she looks well bought, and JP's procurement of these horses can go both ways. But between that and Oscar's brother, he's nailed a couple of nice ones, and those two alone in winners over the last week.
Yeah, for sure. He's got a nice team of it. And another one, maybe for the Fred Winter, we saw at Nace on Saturday. I think Saratoga probably went into plenty of people's notebooks after that 4-year-old rated hurdle. Paddy, it's always a good pointer towards that Fred Winter. We've seen plenty of horses go from there to Cheltenham. Maybe not always the horse who wins the race, but something in behind can often catch the eye. What did you think of that performance there? Highline Crystal obviously came out on top for Gordon and Jack, but Saratoga looked an eye catcher for me.
Yeah, the third horse was an eye catcher too. Charles Burns and Philip Burns, while we're on the subject. Nice horse. I think it was rated 90, the high 90s on the flat, and looks a real good future prospect. But yeah, it looks, every man that's dog is talking about Saratoga and getting the run under his belt. There's in my opinion, there's no doubt he's not had a hard race yet, and I suppose come March it'll be when he really gets the full encouragement and the full thing to go. I suppose. Listen, the winner's decent as well. Gordon's horse, you know. I know Saratoga, Mark didn't beat him up. And look, if you just turn on social media, you'll know what everybody else thinks. But I think the winner was good enough value. I'd say if Saratoga was given even a harder race, would he got by it? I'm not too sure he would. But the third horse in it for me, that's the horse I'll be taking out of it.
Yeah,
that was an interesting race, man. Yeah, I have to say I love the 4-year-olds handicap division for some reason. I've always loved the Fred Winter. Now, if you're somebody who backed Saratoga in Naas and you never watched another race again until the Fred Winter, and Saratoga was a shorter price to be 20 horses in a handicap, you might kind of ask the person beside you, how is this the case? And you could have a conversation around the magic at Cheltenham. But part of me does love it as well. Like and Paddy on about Munsif as well. The kind of cloak and dagger of the 4-year-old division, when you can actually get into the Fred Winter on a relatively low mark, like low 120s over in Britain. So a lot of sort of fairly even average horses will get into the Fred Winter. So there isn't as much pressure on getting a horse to a specific level to get into the race. And we saw Brazil, the path that he took. But I think he's a very talented trainer, a very, very talented trainer. And I like this horse a lot. I thought he jumped well on Saturday, and who knows, like maybe there'll be a French horse who'll come over and just be like ridiculously well handicapped, but the Fred Winter is going to be cracking this year.
Yeah, Saratoga hasn't been missed in the market, though. I think he's a 5-1 joint favourite now, so he'll have plenty of supporters on the day as well, I'm sure. But maybe that Charles Burns horse might be one to keep an eye on as well if he shows up there at all. But anything else from Naas on Saturday catch your eye, Johnny? We had Dino Blue in the Opera Hat by Illuminescent second. Panda Boy, maybe an interesting one for the Fox Hunters there, bought by Brian Gleeson, I think. Now he's running for Martin Brazil, and John Gleeson won of them on Saturday.
Yeah, I quite liked the effort of Grey Jude in the Auction Novice. I think Connor and Dan King's dad, like he literally bought 2 horses for Connor, and one of them was Oscar's brother, and the other was Grey Jude. And I remember Connor was saying after, I don't know which day, maybe it was the day that did they both win of a particular weekend, but he was saying that you can kind of imagine him. He was riding one of the horses one day in work, and I think Daniel was riding the other, and they kind of said to each other, geez, I think the two of these are good. Like, and Connor was like, I don't think I'm wrong on the fella I'm riding, and Daniel was more or less saying the same. Like, and it's wonderful. Like these, I don't think they were expensively bought. Like, Raise You Up was very, very tough for Ross O'Sullivan, very tough. Like Grey Jude looked all over the winner, but he's progressing quite nicely. I thought that was a good effort from him. Other than that, yeah, it would be nice to see what happens with Panda Boy, and as you say, running in those colours now. Martin Brass could have a nice contender, but like I suppose the Dino Blue and the likes of another horse win that even shorter as Jalan Dadar is kind of hard to know what you learn from a race like that. But I like the effort of Grey Jude, and I'd be interested to see where he turns up next. He's a son of Capri, who is obviously a fairly lightly raced, shall we say, national hunt sire, and I love the way he travelled in the race, and maybe stepping up and tripping on nicer ground. He could be very interesting in a handicap at Cheltenham.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll stick on the Conor King story. Just looking up his sales price. Grey Jude, I think he cost 10,000. Oscar's brother an €8,000 buy. So two cheap purchases who turned out fairly good for the King family. And sticking on the note, Paddy, Oscar's brother, he kind of announced himself as maybe a Brown Advisory contender as well as a Grand National contender for Conor King, who only has the 2 horses in training. What a story that is in the JP McManus Silks. It's kind of, I suppose, dream territory for a young trainer.
Yeah, fabulous. Just a smashing family, really, aren't they? They're just really good horse people. I mean, when Daniel was in the racing academy there, it's a good few years ago now. I think I told you before, just a naturally really, really good rider. And he'd just stand out from the crowd. And there's a lot of good riders there that week, and he was the one you went, oh yeah, really good. And then sure, look with Connor, was he a double apprentice champion? Their dad is shrewd, and I was delighted to see Dan keep the ride on the horse, because I know when JP buys a horse, he tends to leave it with the trainer, but to leave that young man still on him was brilliant. I'm not sure I'd back him in a Brown Advisory, just how well he goes on that heavy ground. And look, his jumping was unbelievable the other day, but probably they went around very slow, and he jumped a little bit big. Now, unless if he's a better horse on better ground, then he has to have a massive chance, because he put Willie Mullins' horse fairly much in his place, and it's just a great story. I think JP hasn't really missed in recent years when he's buying these horses. He's got a really nice one now, but I could see him more of a Irish national, English national sort of horse in the future, and hopefully he stays sound for the King boys.
Yeah, he got the English national entry last week anyway. I work with Connor every day in Paddy Toomey's, and like he's the nicest lad you'll ever come across. Like you said, brilliant rider and obviously very talented trainer as well. And hopefully the horse will kick on. He's got the horse has got form on nicer ground. I think he's won on yielding ground. He's won on heavy ground. I just saw Dan getting interviewed afterwards, and he was saying he was jumping a bit big and probably a bit too brave because he had nothing to take him on. He thought he was going to maybe a little bit too slow. If there was something beside him, maybe he might have concentrated a bit more. I think that staying division is wide open, and he definitely deserves his place in the lineup among the top of them. And hopefully, he can go on and do big things for the King family this year. A few other bits from the weekend: we had Staffordshire not winning the Boyne Hurdle. Zanouche was a good one as well for Colin Murphy and Brian Hayes. And Navan on Sunday. Paddy, anything else catch your eye on Sunday?
I thought the bumper winner was very good. A friend of mine there, Michael O'Neill, owns him and rode him. Doing a great job, Michael. He puts his money where his mouth is, and started off riding in the charity race, the Corinthian Challenge, and hasn't looked back ever since. But a French recruit had one run over hurdles in France. I spoke to Michael last week about him. He said whatever he did the weekend, he would improve a lot. And the second horse looks a nice horse too for Henry de Bromhead. But I think that winner could be a really nice horse, and he looks like a chaser in the making.
Very good one to watch out for there. A couple bit of the English stuff then as well. We had Newbury on Saturday, a few big races there. Haughty Calours looks like he's on the Gold Cup trail after winning the Denman Chase. Johnny, is he a contender for you at Cheltenham?
Definitely a contender, yeah. The betting was very, very strong on him. Maybe a reflection of the fact that he'd great Dawning to beat, who's not going to win a Gold Cup at this stage. But you could easily have somebody make the case for a horse to win the Gold Cup that's basically the first 8 in the betting. You could have one person saying this is why you fancy this horse, and you could have one person giving the exact opposite argument that no, you have to take this horse on at the prices. And there's a good bit of that about the race. It's very open. Like I'd make Galloping Deschamps a million. I couldn't have him in the race, yet other people would say he's very solid each way, and Willie Mullins isn't giving up on him. Haiti Killer for me is a contender because he takes a lot of boxes, and I'm not sure, even though he's not young, I'm not sure he's quite reached his ceiling. And the way he races, it's such a difficult race. If there's quite a big field this year, a lot of horses can their odds can basically double after a few flights, because like one mistake and you're nearly out. He could stay out of trouble, and he is a contender for me. To be honest, I really don't know what's going to win the race at this stage, but he's a contender.
Yeah, it's an open enough looking around. He's 9-1, I think, with William Hill at the moment for the Gold Cup. The Lambo won the game. Spirit Paddy, he solidified his position, 5-4 favourite for the Arkle. Not sure did he entirely convince me. He's a real 2-miler. I thought he looked more like a stayer on the day. But what did you think of the performance?
Well, this is his third run now, Emma, and I thought the first day, no, he jumps too big to be a 2-miler. The second day, I thought, geez, yeah, maybe so. He's after warming up, and he was good when he was late. But yeah, I'm the same as you now. I was a little bit disappointed in him. I would definitely wouldn't be backing him at 5-4. Look, I think he has a massive engine, and you never know how well or what he's got left in the tank. But yeah, jumping wise, he wasn't brilliant the other day. We're analysing horses in Ireland a lot, with the likes of Majborough and stuff like that. We've plenty to look at, but this fella spends a lot of time in the air, and I'd say he's a very intelligent horse. He seems to watch what's going on. I'd say he's a bit of a character, and in Cheltenham now, if there's a cameraman at a fence, and there's a lot going on at fences in Cheltenham, and if he gets a little bit, has to have a little look around him and gets a bit starey. Now, this providing Kopek the board is 100% fit and well, which we believe he is. He isn't going to worry about the colour of the fence or anything like that. He's going to run down there. He wouldn't mind taking one from the roots either, where Lalumba likes to, get his feet up, get it be nice and neat, doesn't like to touch a fence. So 2-milers, the best of them would throw themselves at fences. This fella won't be throwing himself at a fence. He'll be minding himself a bit. But look, 5-4 is very, very, very short. maybe it's the competition, the fact we haven't seen Kopek, and he'd be going straight to Cheltenham. But I wasn't blown away by him.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I wouldn't be rushing at him at 5-4 now at all. Look, he might. I'd imagine he will be stepping up on tripping time. Maybe he might get away with the 2 miles at the minute, and with a question mark over a few others in the Arkle. Came from that triumph. Those juvenile hurdles can often kind of become stairs as well down the line. So, yeah, jury's open on him for me as well. And one more to mention: Tutti Quanti won the William Hill hurdle. Johnny, and there's talks of supplementing for the champion hurdle. What did you make of all that from Paul Nichols?
Winning off 138, and I go on about markets maybe too much, but like this horse 100-30 in a race like that, well backed, like to be it looked a strong field, only one non-runner and some obviously well handicapped horse in the race. And Tutti Quanti was just he's by a sire I've never heard of. He's a horse, to be honest, that wasn't really on my radar. I'm not watching British racing day in day out, but he absolutely demolished them. So like off 138, Emma, he's 100% in the bracket of being a contender in what's a kind of a smudged champion hurdle picture. Only a 6-year-old. Paul Nichols is nearly more apt to be run away from Cheltenham these days. He's becoming a bit like, I don't really like the fact that he's kind of almost been too pragmatic and saying there's no point taking on the likes of Willie at Cheltenham if you're going to win an entry. Cheltenham entry will never be Cheltenham, and you should be running horse at Cheltenham really if you have a chance in championship races. And this lad would have a chance. Like I find the champion hurdle picture I think it's definitely open for a horse to really impress after Sergino and all of that. And this horse he comes into the picture, and why not have a crack at it? Really good performance.
Yeah, look, it's good to hear fight and talk from Paul Nichols again. For me, I couldn't really see it, but he deserves his place in the lineup, I'd imagine. And look, hopefully they go and take their chance. You never know what can happen in a champion hurdle. Lads, we'll wrap it up there. But before we go, I'd ask you for a horse to follow from the last week. Paddy, I might go to you first if you haven't.
Yeah, I think the mare won a Nace, Dino Blue. I think she's absolute certainty for Cheltenham. She went around Nace the other day. Her jumping this year has been a little bit questionable. In Navan, she wasn't good. And it was at Punchestown or Fairyhouse the last day. She nearly came off at the last. But she was foot perfect in Nace. She's just starting to really ramp up her form the right time. Good ground around Cheltenham. I don't think there's anything going to touch her.
Very good. Dino Blue for Cheltenham. Johnny, what are you thinking?
Good fighting words there from Paddy. I'll give Too Bossy for Us, who won the maiden hurdle at Punchestown. You kind of make an idiot of yourself at times. I was basically saying, like, how could you back the horse before the race? He never run on ground like that before. Son of Golden Horn, like, never run anything like that. How could he be favourite? Speculator is probably slow enough, who was sent off favourite in the end. But like Too Bossy for Us, like there's definitely room for improvement in some aspects of his performance. Like he was having his third hurdle start, a little bit keen, even though he clearly stays well on the flat. And he wore a tongue tie first run since September. I thought he really went through the gears. I think Willie seemed to be basically saying he's not out of the supreme hurdle picture in terms of his ability. And they're talking about the Melbourne Cup. And those lads, the HOS syndicate, they know how to have a good horse with the Ethical Diamond and all that. But I was mighty impressed by him. That he did so much in the race that was good, I thought, and like could easily step up and trip as well. Very good performance.
Very good. And I think Connections might be out in Abu Dhabi this weekend. Are they with that Absurd? Is he running in that big some big race out there? I can't think of the name of it now, but probably there's a good few Irish horses out there this weekend to keep an eye on if anyone's bored over the weekend. But one I'll go for. I liked Zanouche. She won at Navan yesterday for Colin Murphy and Brian Hayes. She looks like a fairly handy mare. She has an Albert Bartlett entry. They were saying she might get an entry as well for the mares novice, but I'd say she probably looks like an out 3-miler. Stays all day. She loved the testing ground yesterday, and they talked about her in fairly high regard. Whether or not they'll go to Cheltenham, I'm not sure. Colin Murphy kind of sounded as if you know, he'd be happy enough to keep her here as well. There's plenty of good races to target here as well, but I'd say she's definitely one to put in the notebooks, because obviously connections who know how to handle a good one as well, and just one to watch out for, I'd say. But lads, thanks for everything. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Irish Angle, reviewing everything, and Johnny will be on, I think, on Friday with the Irish Edge. So keep an eye out on the channel, plenty to come, and make sure to gamble responsibly if you're having a bet this week.